You are going to love this lesson because you are going to improve all areas of your English at the same time in a fun and engaging way. We're going to read a news article together. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. This is the sport we're discussing today. Do you know what sport this is? Any ideas? It's pickleball, and pickleball is America's fastest growing sport. Why is it so addictive and divisive? First, have you heard of pickleball? Do you recognize this sport? If you have heard of it, put yes, I have. And if you haven't, put no, I haven't. Yes, I have. No, I haven't. Put that in the comments. As for me, I just learned about this sport a few months ago, and when I heard of it, I said, pickleball, what's that? Remember to put your answer in the comments. I'm very interested to know who has heard about pickleball and if it's common in your country, because as you can see here, it's America's fastest growing sport. And this article discusses why it's so addictive. It's interesting to describe a sport as addictive and divisive. Have you seen this adjective before? Divisive. Notice that divisive. This means it causes divisions between people. So you can think of divisions as disagreements. Some people really love it. Some people really hate it. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the division, the thing that divides people, the disagreement. So that's the adjective divisive. And don't worry about taking these notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. So let's learn about pickleball. And maybe you should know that although I heard about pickleball a few months ago, I've never played it. Pickleball is now the fastest growing sport in the nation. So notice the difference here. Pickleball is America's fastest growing sport, but now here we have the fastest growing sport in the nation. What grammatical structure is this? Do you recognize it? It's the superlative. Most students can recognize the superlative with best and worst, but sometimes students forget that article. You need the because there's only one. It's unique. So don't forget that article when you're using the superlative. Pickleball is now the fastest growing sport in the nation being the United States, for the 5th consecutive year in a row. This sentence is poorly worded because it's repetitive. Do you know why what I've highlighted is repetitive? Any ideas? Well, consecutive means in a row. If something happens consecutively, it means one after the other. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, I just listed those numbers consecutively. And that's also the same meaning as in a row. So you don't need both of them. You can just get rid of in a row. There's absolutely no reason to have it because that's what consecutive means. So you can either say for the 5th consecutive year or for the 5th year in a row, but do not use both of them in the same sentence. And notice here, 5th is an ordinal number, so we use the before it, the 5th. And you can recognize an ordinal number because it comes before whatever your noun is, in this case, year. That's how you can recognize it. And then you need the article the. Let's continue with 48.3. So we verbalize this as point. 48.3 million US adults, which is 19% of the adult population. So they're including this so you have context, because what is this number? Is this big? Is this small, the 48.3 million? You don't really know. You need to understand that in relationship to the total population. So that's why they include this information, just to help you understand the significance. 19% of the adult population. Now it's like, wow, that's a lot. having played at least one game in the last 12 months, according to the Association of Pickleball Professionals. Had no idea this association existed. At least one game, at least means a minimum. So the 19% of the adult population could have played 2, 3, 4 or more times, but at least one game. So you can say she's played pickleball once. Once means one time. One time, once. He's played pickleball at least 10 times. So this is the minimum amount. Maybe he's played 12 or 13 times, but at least 10 times. Now, to use our ordinal number and in a row, you could say this is the 10th week in a row we've played pickleball. So remember, in a row, it means one after the other. So there were no weeks in the last 10 weeks that you didn't play pickleball. You could also say this is the 10th consecutive. So if you were to use consecutive, you would put it here, consecutive week. But remember, you wouldn't use both. So it's either the 10th consecutive week or the 10th week in a row. You can use one, but not both. But notice the placement is different. And just to quiz you, what verb tense do all these sentences use, and why does it use that verb tense? Any ideas? She's played, he's played, we've played. The present perfect. She has played, he has played, we have played. And why does it use the present perfect? Because it's an unfinished time reference. It's still possible for these people to play pickleball in the future. So this number, all these numbers can change because it's an unfinished time reference. Did you get that quiz?
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, the movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
That's welcome news for picklers or self-proclaimed addicts. Well, if you play pickleball, I guess you can call yourself a pickler. I'm a pickler. Doesn't describe me. Maybe in the future I'll be a pickler. That's welcome news. So notice, to be, welcome, and then something. So I could say, I'm going to publish videos every day. And then you could say, that's welcome news for me, or maybe for all students. So for someone, but that someone could be you. But notice, to be welcome, that is welcome news. You don't have to use news. You could use, that's a welcome change. Now notice here, you need an article. You don't have an article here because news is in the plural form, so you don't need an article. But change is a singular countable noun, so you need that article because welcome is functioning as an adjective. That's a change. It is. Well, what type of change? Positive, negative, and then you could add in your adjective. That's a welcome change. And native speakers will commonly use the contraction, especially in spoken English. So do you agree that this is welcome news? If you do, then put that in the comments. Welcome news, welcome news. You could put the full sentence, that's welcome news, or just simply welcome news. Put that in the comments. That's welcome news for picklers or self-proclaimed addict. If someone is a self-proclaimed addict, it means that they gave that title to themselves. A doctor did not say, you are addicted to pickleball. They gave that title to themselves, self-proclaimed. But many others, not so much. So to understand this, remember, that's welcome news for picklers, but remember the article said that pickleball is divisive. It creates disagreement. So it's welcome news for some, not welcome news for others. So you could put this expression in the negative and say that's not a welcome change, or you could say that isn't a welcome change, because there are two different ways to form the contraction with the verb to be. That's not, or that isn't, the contraction in the negative form. So I'll move that over for you. Okay, but hopefully you use it in the positive and say that's welcome news. Over the last few years, in response to courts popping up everywhere. So in this case, courts, they're talking about the area where you play pickleball. It's referred to as a court. So you play soccer, football on a field, and you play pickleball, tennis on a court. So the surface here, this is called a court, a pickleball court. So in response to courts, pickleball courts popping up everywhere. When something pops up, it means that it is now available, but it happens quite suddenly or unexpectedly. As you're watching this video, advertisements are going to pop up. They're going to appear suddenly and unexpectedly. I know, they're annoying, but they are the reason why I'm able to create this free content for you. So I apologize in advance for the ads popping up. I hope they don't bother you too much. So in this case, in response to courts, pickleball courts popping up everywhere and bringing the noise that comes with the game. I didn't know pickleball was a noisy game. The noise that comes with the game. Communities around the country have been fighting, sometimes through ugly legal battles. Now, this is interesting because where does a legal battle take place? In a court. A court. So you play pickleball on a court. That's the vocabulary term used to describe the area where you play. But they're fighting these legal battles in a court. In this case, a court of law. So often this happens in English where you have one vocabulary term that's used in totally different contexts. But I understood that this was a pickleball court because of the context of the article. Whereas now, if I saw a court, but we're talking about legal battles, I would know we're talking about a legal court. So always look for context to understand meaning in English. And these ugly legal battles are to restrict pickleball play. Some simply find the game off-putting. This is a very interesting choice of words to describe a sports game, off-putting. Off-putting is an adjective. It means unpleasant. It causes a negative emotion, and that negative emotion causes you to not want to do whatever that activity is. We commonly use this with food, actually. So last night I was watching Top Chef, a chef competition, and there was a beef challenge. And a lot of people made beef tartare. Beef tartare. So that's the spelling of it, pronunciation, beef tartare, which is raw beef. But for me, I find the thought of eating raw beef off-putting. So for me, just thinking about it makes me have like a negative emotion and makes me want to stay away from raw beef. I've never ordered it and I don't want to eat it. I find it off-putting. But you can also use this to describe a characteristic of someone. I generally wouldn't describe an entire person as off-putting, but some quality of that person. For example, his competitive nature is very off-putting. It makes me not want to spend time with that person because of that one quality. I find it off-putting. Off-putting. All right. And competitive, I use this because in sports, when someone really wants to win and really cares about the performance, you would describe that person as competitive. I'm very competitive. If I played pickleball against you, I would want to win. Some simply find the game off-putting, saying it can feel like a cult. That's interesting. A cult is where there is a group of people and they all have a very similar belief, but they're very devoted to that belief, and that belief is generally not widely accepted by society. So kind of odd to describe pickleball as a cult, but okay. Can feel like a cult, while others are finding it's not as risk-free as originally believed, as game-related injuries are on target to cost Americans upwards of $500 million in medical costs next year. Okay, on target too. So this is next year, it's in the future. So they don't know what the medical costs related to pickleball are, but if they're on target to, it means like based on the analysis today, I can predict that the cost will be $500 million next year if it keeps increasing by this amount per month and we have this many months in the year. So that would be on target too. This is very common in a work context because you have deadlines. So you could say we're on target. So to be on target and then your infinitive. So let me highlight the R because that is part of the expression to be on target infinitive. We're on target to complete the project by next week. Now, if your boss asks you, how's the project going? Are we still going to make the deadline? You can say, we're on target. We're still on target, to be on target. So you can use just that without the infinitive as well. So on target to cost Americans upwards of, this is also a minimum amount. So upwards of 500 million or more. So remember we learned before at least. So now you have at least $500 million or upwards of $500 million. At least is the more common of the two. Let's continue. Invented in 1965 by 3 dads as a way to entertain their kids during summer vacation, the cross-genre sport, so this is pickleball, the cross-genre sport, combines tennis, badminton, and ping pong. So this is why it's cross-genre. Genre means one type. So what genre of movies do you like? What genre of food do you like? What type? And then in sports, there are different types of sports. So it's a cross-genre. It combines different types: tennis, badminton, and ping pong. And can be played in singles. So me versus you, bring it on. I'm very competitive. Or doubles, you and me versus 2 other people. And we will win, right? Singles or doubles. It's also relatively inexpensive and simple to start. Now notice how they use the term relatively, because you can only understand the cost of something. Is this pen expensive or cheap? I guess I should show you a pen. Is this beautiful sparkly pen expensive or cheap? Well, I can only answer that when you compare the cost of this pen to other pens, and then you understand the cost. But just knowing the amount of this pen, you don't know if it's expensive or cheap. So that's why they're saying relatively inexpensive, because it's in comparison to the cost of playing other sports. And simple to start. So a paddle, balls, and pickleball size net can be had, to be had. This is an interesting way of saying can be purchased, can be bought, can be had for well under $200 in total. So to be had, just think of it as you can have these items, and then they just change the word order to make it more succinct, but it would be more common to say can be purchased
or can be bought. And you could only use this in very specific contexts and structures to make it sound correct. So to be safe, just say purchased or bought for well under $200 in total. So notice well under. So this is less than, well under $200 in total. And tennis and basketball courts. So this is also the vocabulary term you use for basketball. Tennis and basketball courts are often converted for pickleball use, making it easily accessible. So converted means you take one object and then you change it into another object. So this was a basketball court, but we converted it into a pickleball court. We changed it to a pickleball court, making it being pickleball, playing pickleball, making it easily accessible. If something is accessible, it means that it's available to a large audience, the general public. By the 1990s, so when you have S in front of a decade, 1990, if you didn't have the S, it would mean the year 1990. But by the 1990s, and notice you have the when you have S in front of it, but if it were just 1990, you wouldn't have the. So by 1990 is the year 1990. By the 1990s means any time from 1990 to 1999. So it's within that entire decade. Pickleball was played regularly in schools and retirement communities, given that it's easy to play and enjoyed by people of all ages, from kids to seniors. So here, given that, you could replace that with because, but not because that, it's just because it's easy to play. Given that, it's easy to play. But you could also just say given without that. So that is optional. That's why it's in parentheses. Given it's easy to play and enjoyed by people of all ages, from kids to seniors. So this supports that it's accessible. Remember, available to a large audience or the general public. Its popularity really took off during the COVID-19 pandemic. So here, its popularity took off. So its popularity increased very substantially or quickly, so to a large degree. So hopefully you say, my fluency took off, increased significantly to a large degree. My fluency took off after I subscribed to JForrest English. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already to make sure your fluency takes off. So its popularity really took off during the COVID-19 pandemic as people were in need of safe, socially distanced outdoor exercises. Folks across the country. So notice here, notice my pronunciation, oak, folk. So that L is not pronounced, it's silent. The word folks is very commonly used, especially in North America. It refers to a group of people. So if you're starting a presentation, you could say, hi folks. It's a little more informal, but it's extremely common. So you should know the pronunciation. It's the same pronunciation as the vowel in oak tree, or joke, whatever word you know the pronunciation of, you can use that as an anchor word. Folk, no L, silent L. And this is the same as the pronunciation of yolk, no L, silent L, as in egg yolk. How do you like your egg yolks? I like mine runny. Now, remember with legal court and pickleball court, it depends on the context. Well, my folks, this means my parents. So folks can also mean parents, but it depends on the context. And also, if you used it, folks, with parents, you would have a possessive or something in front of it. But here, as a group of people, you generally wouldn't say my folks. So context and grammatical structure can tell you, my folks love playing pickleball. My parents love playing pickleball.
Folks across the country have been in an uproar over the noisiness. The noisiness. So before we heard noise, now noisiness. Notice that pronunciation. Students pronounce this wrong. Noise, noisiness. Noise and noisiness have different meanings because if you just say over the noise just means the sounds that you hear, but it's not positive or negative. It's just neutral. There's some noise. I hear noise. Is it a positive or a negative? We don't know. But if you say noisiness, it's a negative thing because noisiness means the fact that the sport is noisy. And describing something as noisy means too much noise, a bad amount of noise. So it's negative. And we know that it's negative because they also used an uproar. Folks across the country have been in an uproar over the noisiness. An uproar is a situation when a lot of people are really angry and ironically, they actually make a lot of noise, usually in like yelling or screaming or booing, boo. So if you're at a sports game and the home team loses, the crowd will be in an uproar. They'll boo, they'll yell, oh, this sucks. They'll get angry, upset. They'll be in an uproar. And it's ironic because they're angry because the sport is noisy, but then they're in an uproar, which means they cause a lot of noise themselves. So it's kind of ironic choice of words here. Described by some as loud popping sounds that can be jolting. So imagine you're trying to work at your computer and outdoors, out your window, there's a pickleball court and you're trying to work and all you hear is, I guess it would be like of the ball hitting the paddle. And as you're working, and it jolts you. It causes you to suddenly move. That's a jolt. So that's the image you can have of why the sound could be jolting. I don't know why it would be any different from the sounds you would hear at a tennis court, for example, but I don't play pickleball. So if you play pickleball, you can let me know. Often taking the fights into courts of law. So now we know that, well, they specified the context of law, but you could say also into courts, just into courts or into the courts being specific courts, like the Supreme Court, for example. So you could just say courts in general, the courts, or you could specify of law, which normally isn't done because it's the context that makes it obvious that it is a court of law. So generally we don't specify that because of the context. Quite an advanced article for a simple topic like pickleball. So now what I'll do is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Pickleball is America's fastest growing sport. Why is it so addictive and divisive? Pickleball is now the fastest growing sport in the nation for the 5th consecutive year in a row. With 48.3 million US adults, 19% of the adult population having played at least one game in the last 12 months, according to the Association of Pickleball Professionals. That's welcome news for picklers or self-proclaimed addicts, but many others, not so much. Over the last few years, in response to courts popping up everywhere and bringing the noise that comes with the game, communities around the country have been fighting, sometimes through ugly legal battles, to restrict pickleball play. Some simply find the game off-putting, saying it can feel like a cult, while others are finding it's not as risk-free as originally believed, as game-related injuries are on target to cost Americans upwards of $500 million in medical costs next year.
Invented in 1965 by three dads as a way to entertain their kids during summer vacation, the cross-genre sport combines tennis, badminton, and ping pong, and can be played in singles or doubles. It's also relatively inexpensive and simple to start. A paddle, balls, and a pickleball-sized net can be had for well under $200 in total. And tennis and basketball courts are often converted for pickleball use, making it easily accessible. By the 1990s, pickleball was played regularly in schools and retirement communities, given that it's easy to play and enjoyed by people of all ages, from kids to seniors. Its popularity really took off during the COVID-19 pandemic, as people were in need of safe, socially distanced outdoor exercises. Folks across the country have been in an uproar over the noisiness, described by some as loud popping sounds that can be jolting, often taking the fights into courts of law.
Do you want me to make more lessons just like this? If you do, then put pickleball in the comments below. And of course, make sure you like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And I know you'll love this lesson, so make sure you watch it right now.